Okay, good evening everyone. My name is Celestial Copper. Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to go ahead and cover all of the Vinegar Syndrome August announcements. This is a bit of a lighter month for them. 3 titles, although one of them is a box set, but it's pretty light on features, so hopefully this will be a shorter video. We'll see. I am not known for my brevity, but in any case, we're going to be talking about 3 releases today. If you're not familiar with this segment, basically I'm going to take all of the releases that were actually counted in the Vinegar Syndrome subscriber package, and I'm going to do spoiler-free reviews of them, and then also go through all of the special features and tell you which ones are worth watching and what insights I gleaned from them. But before we get started, please go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave me lovely comments to read. And also check the link in the description for a link to my Patreon account, where you can find access to at least 3 Patreon-exclusive videos per month. And for supporters at the highest tier, you also get customized, handwritten, and handcrafted postcards from me. And I think they're pretty neat, so go check that out. Anyway, let's go ahead and get on with the video. So the first one that I want to talk about today is the absolute fucking banger, Killer Condom. Let's go ahead and do a quick unboxing for you. Get the front artwork, which I think is quite good. Get the lovely condom spine, which I'm a big fan of. And the Killer Condom back artwork. Okay, we've talked about this a few times now, but this is one of the ones where it's just a slipcase for no real reason other than to give more artwork. There's no booklet in here or anything, but typically I have a problem with this because it just takes up more space and it adds cost for just some additional artwork, which I don't think quite justifies it. But for this one, I actually do think they went ahead and justified it, because the slip box is great, but the slipcover is amazing too. We have this incredible artwork here. We have the spine with the severed dick popping off here, which is fun. The glare is kind of bad, but let's see how well I can showcase this. Detective Macaroni on the back here. You got the dude with his dick chopped off, which continues on to the spine. More severed dicks and more condoms. Big fan of all of this lovely artwork here. This pulp delight. And then there's no original poster art, which is disappointing because there are some that exist and they're quite good. There's your special features if you want to take a look there. And then it's a 3-disc set. Fucking stacked edition. Okay, so right out the gate, I'm going to say, just fully get this out of the way, that this is an absolute fucking banger. It's one of my favorite discoveries of the year, and it's one of my favorite releases of the year. Full stop. I fully recommend this. You should go buy it right now. It should be sold out by now, and it's not, which is a tragedy. Although I guess if you're watching this at the time of uploading, you can't buy it right now because the Vinegar Syndrome releases are all down from their site. But when it comes back up, or if you can find a copy, you should get it for sure. What to say about Killer Condom? I had heard about it first from Dr. Will Dotson, personal friend and friend of the Disconnected show, where he had discussed it as one of his favorite films and one that he always programs in his cult and exploitation cinema course at the university that he teaches at. And he had a really great anecdote that has always stuck with me, where he said that one of his students, who was I think theology major, had come up to him at the end of the course and said, you know, I wasn't sure what I was going to take out of this course, but I wasn't expecting to say that Killer Condom would be one of my favorite movies, and yet here we are. That little anecdote always stuck with me, and he had always said that this was like a film that had interesting things to say about queer people and about trans people, and is actually fairly progressive and more thoughtful than the title would imply. And I fully endorse and agree with all of that. The film is based off of a, I guess, fairly popular German comic book artist who was gay and who had written a series that had previously been adapted into a very successful film, though it was pretty, like, straight-washed? Whitewashed, is that a thing I can say? Straight-washed? Made palatable to a straight audience, and thus it was fairly successful. And the producers at the time had said that they wanted to capitalize on that, so this is really the only reason that a project like Killer Condom was greenlit and actually brought to fruition. They talk about this in the special features, but it's obvious that that's not going to be as popular, especially if you're honest about the source material and you don't straight whitewash it, which they don't. This is a super gay movie through and through. I've heard that some people on this platform are having to caveat that they're not gay, and you know, they like it, but that doesn't mean that they're gay. Grow up, but also, like, The movie is really gay, like it's very queer. So I guess know that going in. If you have a problem with that kind of thing, this is not going to be your sort of thing, but neither is this channel, so I'm surprised you're still watching this video. But in any case, this is essentially kind of a sci-fi, monster horror, hard-boiled, neo-noir German film set in New York City. It's all sorts of things. It's wild. Yeah, so the film is all in German, but it's very much stylistically in the vein of neo-noir and of classic noir. It's set in New York City, and in fact there's a lot of on-location cinematography and shots there, with the rest of it being shot in interior sets in Germany. But the whole thing is a German language film. So it makes for an interesting kind of, when the main character is Italian on top of that too. So it makes for an interesting kind of cultural melting pot of sorts. But it's about a gay detective who is investigating a case of condoms that bite people's penises off at the Quickie Motel, which is just a sex hotel, essentially. And they're providing condoms that are becoming little guys, little bitey guys, and biting dicks off, right? So it kind of explores the inherent homophobia in a project like this, where it's not taken as seriously. There's always this kind of subtext where it's like, well, it's happening to those people, or it's happening at that kind of seedy environment, right? The film came out in 1996, and so obviously it's a post-AIDS film, but I feel like that sort of comparison is fairly obvious, and I'm not doing any great insight here by comparing like this kind of problem that seems to disproportionately affect queer people, poor people, etc., that is not taken as seriously by police and is not treated as a serious issue. Like, I don't think I'm making any kind of grand observation there, but you know, that's clearly what's going on here. There's also I believe the character is trans, although they don't say it. I don't think they quite have the language for it there. She's kind of presented as like a drag queen, but she pretty thoroughly and consistently asserts her new name and pronouns throughout the film, and it's treated much more respectfully than I think you would expect from like a 1990s horror comedy, which is kind of the peak for like trans people as the butt of the joke in comedy in mainstream cinema, you know? The character is well-rounded and well-written, and she and our lead have a very kind of complex and thoughtful relationship. In terms of the gratuitousness of the violence and the sex in the film, I mean, it goes as far as you might expect, but maybe not quite as far. Like, you don't necessarily see a ton of dicks getting chopped off, you don't see a ton of severed dicks. There's more in the uncut version than there is in the theatrical, but there's also not like a super ton of nudity or anything like that. There is some gags as it relates to some pretty ridiculous nudity, but you're mostly kind of dealing with a lot of male asses. So if that's your kind of thing, enjoy. I also want to take a second to talk about the special effects. They are done by the director of the Necromantic films. I really don't want to try to butcher his name, but they're done just incredibly, and I love the condoms so much. Like, they're so cute. They're such just little guys. They just chomp, you know? They're very good. Like, all of the effects are done in camera. There's no computer effects whatsoever. It's all practical, all in-camera effects. And let's circle back for a second. The fact that we don't have a killer condom plush on the Vinegar Syndrome site is an actual crime, and that needs to happen like yesterday. If anybody who can make that happening is watching this video, fucking do it. I will buy one. That shit will sell out quick. Vinegar Syndrome needs to get on the plush game like ASAP anyway, but the killer condom plush is like the perfect entry point, so to speak. H.R. Geiger, or H.R. Giger, I think is how it's actually pronounced, was actually a visual effects consultant on the film and came up with a design for the killer condom and some of the torture devices in the film and all this other stuff. The film, I will say, is a little bit long. It does overstay its welcome a little bit. It struggles from a touch of pacing issues, but it's also a touch didactic in its themes, but I think that the message is still just as necessary now, if not more so than it was at the time. And while the film is serious, it is very fun and it is very comedic, and it's not a film that is dealing in subtlety. Let's just say that. I mean, we're talking about killer condom here. Overall, I found the film to be joyous, cathartic, interesting, subversive, extreme, hilarious, immensely entertaining, and heartwarming. One last note about the film before I move on to the special features, but there are scenes of right-wing politicians that really just feel like they were out of the headlines today. Like, these people don't change. Their regressive, homophobic, genocidal attitudes, I would say, only adapt as opposed to change, but they don't even really do that. They get trotted out under different pretenses with different excuses at the forefront, but the insidious, vile messaging is the same at the heart of it every time. Anyway, I give that film an 8 out of 10, at least. Big fan, go give it a try. Keep an open mind. It's not just like silly schlock. I mean, it is, but there's real themes and there's real messaging and there's real craft to be found here. So let's get into special features. So first we have an interview with the director, Martin Walls. This is a really excellent, comprehensive interview, and I highly recommend it. There's some really great anecdotes about shooting in NYC, including one story in particular that I really like, how they would kind of get away with shooting in illegal places. They would just essentially challenge... what they had said is that they were under the impression that New York City cops think they have absolute power, which is kind of true. And so they would just be like, oh, I didn't realize that you were unable to grant us permission to do this. Or like they would kind of phrase it in a way where like they were challenging the police officer's authority. And so they had entire blocks sectioned off to get the shot that they wanted just by kind of playing on the police officer's ego. He also talks about how a lot of right-wingers, like when he would go to screenings of the film or just kind of hang out in theaters to see the reception it was getting, he would see like obvious right-wing dudes come in to see it, and then once they realized what they were getting into, they would leave. And he's just really happy to finally get the proper director's cut out there because, you know, some crucial scenes are cut. Some of the more extreme violence is cut, and it just wasn't his original vision. And it's always really heartwarming and really nice to see that stuff finally come to fruition for independent filmmakers. Next is a show and tell with Martin Walls. Really it's just a showcase of the various props and promotional materials that he has in his house that he's saved throughout the years, from, you know, the making of Killer Condom to promotional materials of Killer Condom. A lot of stuff from Trauma, who were the ones who picked it up in the United States. He also has a handwritten letter from H.R. Giger saying how much he loved the film, which is really nice. Next is an interview with the special effects supervisor. This is the guy from Necromantic. I'm going to try to pronounce his name exactly one time. Jorg Butgereit? Butt-Garrett? Sure you wouldn't appreciate that. It's really excellent. It's extremely candid and detailed. He talks about how he was hired for his proficiency in practical effects on his own films and for their realism. Like, Martin had seen Necromantic and some of these other films that he had done and been like, yeah, that's my guy, I want that guy. Like, that shit looks real. And he's doing it on no budget. He's doing it with pure craft. Get that guy. And he says that many of the sequences that he produced were rejected for being too gruesome. He would send it out his dailies and producers would be like, bro, that's too much. Like, we can't put this out. So he had to dial it back quite a bit, and a lot of his scenes got cut. But he was like, I get it. You know, it's not what they were looking for. My shit's pretty hard, you know? He was a huge fan of H.R. Giger, and he was kind of tasked with relaying the bad news whenever one of his ideas got cut or was considered too extreme or just not in the budget. But he said that he handled it really well every time and just understood the nature of the business. And he also thinks that the film's politics have aged really well. This comes up time and time again in the interviews, how at the time it wasn't seen as much of a big of a deal, at least in the culture and in the political zeitgeist of Germany at the time, like especially in the larger cities, like queer people were very visible and like gay acceptance was rather high, and so they didn't feel like they were doing anything particularly progressive or subversive. But with the way that things have gone, like it seems as like people watch the film now and they're shocked at how progressive it is and how forward-thinking it is. And so they're very proud of that and how it has stood the test of time, even dealing with very sensitive subject matters that so many people fail at. Next is an interview with the editor, Simone Kleyer. She says that she got the job after telling the director that her favorite film was 1, 2, 3 by Billy Wilder. She said that he had been asking people all day, like, what their favorite film was, and nobody could give a straight answer, and she was the first person that could actually have a conversation with him about films, and good ones at that, and so she got the job based on that alone. This was her first feature film editing project. She wishes she had done some stuff differently, but overall she likes the film and thinks it was ahead of its time. Next is a commentary with the director and Jorg, the special effects supervisor. Yeah, I was kind of talked about this already, but they really kind of hammered home how like all this stuff that they were depicting and discussing was fairly normalized at the time, and watching it today, it feels like we've actually regressed in LGBT acceptance, because like now it gets such shocked and like amazed responses, and they get so much credit for making such a progressive film, when in reality it feels like things have gotten so bad that this feels braver than it was at the time. Next is an interview with Udo Samel, who is the lead actor who plays Detective Macaroni. He discusses how difficult it was being gay in the 90s and how things have gotten easier, but he feels that that window of acceptance and tolerance and ease is actually closing. Like this is a consistent theme, is that every queer person just kind of, and every person close to queer people just sees the writing on the wall and just knows how things are going with the dangerous rhetoric and the increasing power of fascistic criminals. So his take was a little bit different in that he seemed to have a harder time being gay in the 90s than the director did, but of course everybody's experience is different. One nice anecdote is that he met his partner shortly after the release of the film, and they've been together for 25 years, so that was very sweet. Next was an interview with Peter Lohmeyer, who plays the kind of detective partner, the kind of straight-laced, slightly homophobic guy in the film. He felt that the film was important for increasing tolerance, and he's proud of it today, but he relays an anecdote where he had his Killer Condom t-shirt as like a member of the cast and crew, and he would wear it all the time, and his daughter was highly embarrassed by that, which is fun. Next is an interview with a prop collector. His name is Roman Gutinger. This fucking dude has 5 warehouses of like rare and original props from films and promotional materials and stuff. He has storyboards of the film. He has a scrapbook from the set, because he's a personal friend of H.R. Giger, and so he was actually on set many days and filled out a scrapbook. He's got the original Trauma poster, and he has the original and the one and only monster condom from the end of the film. They made exactly one of them, and he has it. It's like fucking falling apart, but it's on one of his many shelves, and he kind of shows it and is very careful to touch it, and he's like, I don't know that I ever want to move this again because it's so fragile, but there it is. Next is an early short film from the director. The title is in German. I'm not going to try to butcher it, but it's actually very good. It's only about 15 minutes long, and it's not really, it's like a psychological horror type of thing about women being afraid of their abusive male partners. And even in the short time, it really does a good job building tension and suspense and offering thrills, and it's really great. Like, don't miss it if you have the release. Give that one a watch for sure. Next is a little promotional featurette that Trauma did called Would You Use This Condom? Where they took a prop from the film, a little condom with like teeth. And we're going around New York City asking pedestrians if they would use the condom. It's pretty entertaining, and it's pretty short. And then there's an archival commentary that is good, but it mainly repeats a lot of the information that is in the rest of this stuff, so I didn't watch the whole thing. And that's Killer Condom. Absolutely 100% recommended. Go pick it up. Next, let's talk about Amazon Jail 1 and 2. So there's your slipcover, back artwork. No original art. I mean, they're doing reversible in all of these, but a lot of them don't have the original poster, which is disappointing to me, because I really like having that. 2-disc set, one for each film. All the special features are on Amazon Jail 1, I believe. Okay, so let's talk about this one. This is one that I'm going to recommend with some pretty severe reservations. Like, I think this is for a certain type of person. I don't think I'd recommend this to the average person at all, but let's go ahead and get into it, and you can make your own call. So the first, Amazon Jail, they're both Brazilian films, which is really cool. I love seeing Vinegar Syndrome highlight like non-white countries, non-English speaking countries, films from the global south, stuff like that. It's just really vital and important work, and I really appreciate it, and it's great that I get to experience it. The first one, Amazon Jail. It's a women in prison film. It's about like a white slave trade where this guy who's running it with his, I guess bisexual, but leaning lesbian wife kind of actually runs the jail with like the prisoners, and they kind of sell them as full service sex workers to people. Like, it's very much like a trafficking ring they've got going on. So it's pretty fucked up stuff, and this kind of thing is not going to be for everybody. Like, this very exploitative, sort of sleazy film that takes very grim subject matter and uses it as an excuse to have naked women on screen for as long as possible. The amount of nudity in this film is really something to behold. Like, it's pretty much constant, like in almost every frame of the film. The film isn't particularly great, but it is fairly interesting, and it goes far enough. Like, it is sleazy enough, and it is kind of intense and interesting enough to be worthwhile, in my opinion. There's some really interesting scenes throughout the jungle. I don't know if this is a spoiler, but there's a scene in particular where one of the women is sort of collapsing from heat stroke, and to solve this, one of the other women takes the cold water from the river that they're walking through and like just literally rubs it in her vagina, and like the camera zooms and you just kind of see it, and then it seems to help, and the woman who's actively doing this is looking up at the woman with like nothing but pure like lust and love in her eyes. It's a very bizarre, if not somewhat tender, sapphic moment. So the film is questionable for sure, and it is not going to be for everybody, but I did overall enjoy it and find it worthwhile, and I gave that one a 6 out of 10. Amazon Jail 2, however, I did not like this film at all, and in some instances I honestly would recommend not watching it even if you buy it. First of all, the film is very bad. It gets very, very poorly and incompetently put together, and it's not as funny as it thinks it is. But also there is a really heinous scene of animal cruelty. Thankfully, my friend John Peters in his Letterboxd review warned me ahead of time that this was going to happen, and so I was able to anticipate it and look away. But apparently there is a scene in which a man takes a real snake and ties it into a knot, which is just the most heinous and horrific thing. It's honestly upsetting, even just knowing that happens and even thinking about it, and I'm glad I didn't actually see it. But suffice it to say, I'll never be revisiting this film, and I don't recommend watching it. I mean, even that heinousness aside, like, this is an escape film where, like, this guy, or these two guys, take these female prisoners, and they free them, and then they're running away from their captors in the jungle. It's paced at, like, walking speed. Like, they'll just kind of be walking and they'll run into their captors who are heavily armed, and then it's just like Looney Tunes shit where they're like throwing bombs at each other and shit, and nobody ever really gets hurt. But like, they'll run into each other and throw bombs at each other, and then they'll just kind of walk away, and then they'll run into each other again, and it just kind of is rinse and repeat. Just this, it's so bizarre to see like chase sequences filmed at like a snail's pace. It doesn't work. It's so confusing, like tonally and pacing wise, and it's just really not good. There's like a fucking boat chase scene at the end of this that moves at near slow cinema speeds. Like, it's unbelievable to watch, to be honest with you. The film is not as funny as it thinks it is. Like, there's bumbling characters in here that are just dumb, and I didn't like it at all. So I think I gave that one a very generous 4 out of 10 and recommend you skip it. Anyway, onto the features. So first up, there's an audio commentary on Amazon Jail with historian Fabio Velozzo. I have to be completely honest with you, I struggled quite a bit with his accent. It's not his fault, and I don't blame Vinegar Syndrome for not subtitling a commentary, but you know, between my audio processing issues and English not being his first language, it was a struggle to understand a lot of it. But there is like a ton of info in this, especially for people who love or want to know more about the women in prison genre. There's something interesting here that I'm not sure how often I've seen before, where he just calls it 5 minutes early. He's like, oh, here's the last scene. It's really good. I'll leave you with this. And then he's like, bye. And then there's still 5 minutes left in the runtime. It's interesting. After that, there's an interview with Amazon Jail actress Elizabeth Hartman. She's 90 years old, and she definitely looks it, but it's really cool that they were able to get an interview with her. You know, preserving these stories and getting these people talking about these super obscure films. It's very valuable. Next is an interview with actress Vanessa Alves. She tells us the anecdote about how they had to, like, when they were walking through the jungle and everything, they had to cover themselves in ultra stinky oil to repel the mosquitoes. Oh, that's something I didn't mention. Amazon Jail is one of the sweatiest films probably ever made. It is just constantly drenched in sweat, and I'm sure that this is part of it. Like, if they're covered in oil the whole time, it's going to glean quite a bit, right? Anyway, she says that she started doing nude scenes like right when she turned 18 and she was still a virgin, and like it just didn't bother her, like she just didn't feel uninhibited about it at all, though it was a bit awkward doing sexual scenes when she had never experienced it before in real life. Just a really candid and interesting interview. Next is an interview with film historian Dr. Victoria Rutalo. She is a professor of Latin American Studies in Canada, and this is just an absolute must-see interview. It's fantastic, like academic analysis on the genre and of Brazilian cinema in general. She describes this type of filmmaking as margins of the margin, because films produced in the global south, films produced in Brazil and specifically, were fairly popular and were pretty prolific, but overall they were still the margin. Like we're not talking about Hollywood films here. And then these women in prison sexploitation films are the margin of that already established marginal milieu of filmmaking. However, she talks about how this sexploitation stuff was actually pretty important to Brazil's culture and political history, because they managed to get away with skirting censorship during the dictatorship, making these like silly sex films, because the dictatorship of the time didn't perceive them to be a threat. They were like, oh, let the masses have their silly sex movies, you know? And so they would sneak in more subtle, subversive political messaging, which I thought was fascinating. Also, I saw in the credits that it's edited by Sam Deegan, so shout out to Sam for doing just editing on other people's works now. That's really cool. And it's really well edited. Good job. And then finally, there's a video essay by Annie Rose Malamet from the Girls Guts and Jalo podcast that I support financially and highly recommend and enjoy. It's just a really, really excellent analysis. It's 60 minutes long, and it compares women in prison films, generally speaking, to the characters and tropes of the Marquis de Sade. It's not analyzing Amazon jail in particular, really, to any extent. It is mentioned, but it is really just kind of an essay on the genre as a whole. It's really excellently put together, and there's tons and tons of, let's call them distracting clips of like pretty intense lesbian softcore scenes. It definitely made me want to watch more films in the genre, I'll tell you that. And that's it for Amazon Jail 1 and 2. Recommended with reservations. Definitely for the first one, but also just as cultural history and as an exercise in education. The supplements are really great, and these are films that you almost certainly haven't seen before and come from genres, countries, and styles that you're likely unfamiliar with, so I think it's worth it for that alone. Okay, and finally we have the Cardona Collection Volume 2. The much unanticipated, highly maligned sort of collection of films. I don't own nor have I seen any of the films in the first collection, and I've heard that they have quite a bit of animal cruelty in them, so I'm definitely reticent to check them out. I've also heard that they're pretty awful on top of that, so my morbid curiosity wants me to watch them, but there's a lot holding me back. Anyway, I'd heard a lot of people be like, oh dear God, we're being saddled with another collection of these films. Although they did a higher print run of this than they did for the first one, which I find to be pretty baffling, because I think they're struggling to get rid of that first one. And I know that they've committed to 3 of these, so I don't quite understand the thinking there, but they printed 8,000 of these, so. It includes the films BEAKS the Movie, Under Siege, La Casa que Arde de Noche, and SOS Conspiracion Bikini. Let's do a little unboxing here. I love this artwork, honestly. I don't think it needs to be in a hard box, I gotta be so honest. It is a box set, so I guess I'll give it a pass on this one. Kind of have that box set look to it. Plus, there's a lot of good artwork here. More great stuff, utilizing images from the various films. Again, no original art, though I'll give it a pass just because there's so many films in here. It's the back, and you get 1, 2, and 3 discs in this handy little set. Like I said, I was kind of dreading this experience and going into it with reservations and kind of like anticipating this to be homework more than anything, just because I committed to reviewing all these, but I gotta say, I ended up enjoying and would recommend half of the films here. And I think I would recommend this set overall, especially because the price is very low. Like, I think that this is like $30 or something like that. Like, it's a very reasonable price for 4 films, and you still get a good amount of special features and really nice packaging and everything, and the restorations look quite good. So I guess going in order of when I watched them, BEAKS the Movie was very clearly birdsploitation. Can we call that a genre? Like, sharksploitation is ripping off of Jaws. This is just the birds, right? It's not particularly competent or interesting or compelling in any way on its own, but there is just an ungodly and unacceptable amount of animal cruelty on this. This is kind of the one that they use to sell the box, and I don't think it's worth all that. I think it's the most popular, but it's absolutely not the best film in the set. I don't know, there's scenes early on where someone is shooting clay pigeons in like a contest, and then they let loose real pigeons and he shoots them, and you see it entirely on film, which is really sad. But there's one scene in particular that is just so horrible and unacceptable and like kind of ruined my day, honestly. I wish I hadn't seen it, where this guy, I mean, essentially like birds are attacking people, right? You get the idea. It actually has a really great opening scene where people are on hang gliders and get attacked pretty viciously by hawks. It's a good way to open the film. Too bad it doesn't go anywhere with it, but there's that. Anyway, the old man is like, the birds are like attacking his house, and so he has like his fucking big ass gun, and he's got a hawk, like a beautiful real hawk in his sights, and he shoots it, and the bird just explodes. Like, I feel very confident that they strapped a bomb to this innocent bird and let it loose and then filmed it as it was blown up. It's just really horrible and tragic and unacceptable, and I understand preserving this stuff, like I really do. I wish it didn't exist, but it does, and so it is our job as film historians and preservationists and analysts to engage with it honestly. But other companies like TerraVision and even Unearthed Films and Grindhouse Releasing offer animal cruelty-free cuts of these films. And I really just want to put out my plea to Vinegar Syndrome to at least give us the option to not see real horrible animal deaths. It would really just be appreciated. Yeah, I don't know. It's just really tragic and pretty unacceptable that it's there in the first place. But that's Beaks the movie. Kind of sucks, and I don't recommend it. Moving along though, Under Siege is easily, to me, the highlight of the set, the best film here, and probably worth the price of admission alone. Oh, I gave Beaks a 3 out of 10. Don't bother. However, Under Siege is this really, really excellent kind of heist thriller, home invasion type of thing, where this group of criminals is like raiding a casino, and then they invade this rich man's home and keep his family hostage, and then, you know, there's all sorts of hiccups that occur along the way, and kind of ends in this really, really extensive and specific and still rather thrilling like plane landing sequence, you know, without giving anything away. It just really, really keeps your attention and keeps the suspense pretty expertly, and there's really competently made and thrilling action sequences, and I don't know, it's just a great film. Like, if you're into heist movies, if you're into home invasion, hostage type beats, like, this is an easy recommend, and one that I think most people could enjoy for sure. Next is SOS Conspiracy Bikini. I've talked about my distaste for spy films in a lot of avenues and a lot of different videos and podcast appearances. This is kind of one of the worst instances of it, and it's just so, you genuinely could not pay me to care about anything that happens in this film. Like, right from the jump, I am so thoroughly uninterested in this from a storytelling perspective, from an aesthetic perspective. James Bond is already something that I hate, and doing a poor man's version of that, like a pale imitation of it, is hardly anything that I'm interested in. I genuinely could not even tell you what happens in this film. It's just sort of international political intrigue, ridiculous plots, very silly little, what do you call them, gadgets or whatever. Like, you get video clips in like the ink of a period on a piece of paper. It's just absurd. Like, I'm still maybe crafting my thoughts onto why this style is so antithetical to what I like. But, like, at least in this one you're following a female lead, but you're still kind of pursuing this sort of straight male fantasy and this sort of boring dad fantasy of being an interesting person, or knowing an interesting person. I don't know. Just the whole thing is so exceedingly dull, and I just couldn't care less. Anyway, it's at least fairly competently put together, and I think I gave it like a more generous rating just because I struggled to even pay attention, so I didn't feel like I was engaging with it fairly. So there's my disclaimer there, is that I'm not the person to judge this kind of thing. I really am not. Like, this kind of thing just really, really does not work for me on any level. I gave it a 3 out of 10. At least they didn't kill any animals in it. So that's cool. I went into this actually dreading a lot of animal cruelty, but Beaks is the only one with it. So if you're really hardline about that stuff, as I think is reasonable and admirable, Beaks is the only one you want to skip entirely based off of that. All this other stuff is safe. So with the other dud out of the way, let's talk about The House That Burns at Night, which is just an excellent, wild melodrama brothel film. It stars this woman that kind of makes her way into a brothel and seduces the man kind of in charge of it. He's the matriarch is really at the head of this, but she's dating this man who's like 60 years younger than she is. It's this sort of gross but subverted dynamic, I guess. And so this woman kind of carries on an affair with this man and very quickly like worms her way in and kind of works her way to the top, like this kind of very cynical power ploy sort of thing. It's kind of all over the place, and it's a very bizarre film. Like there's weird desert sequences and all sorts of like non sequitur sex scenes and scenes that clearly exist just to like add gratuitous nudity into what is really just like a melodramatic romance film. Like you'll just this one particularly egregious moment where it just cuts to one of the there's also like drag queen femboys in this that are kind of great and are just kind of there. Like it's not really made a whole thing of too much. And they're just kind of stripping and entertaining the male guests the same as the cis women there, which I thought was really kind of fascinating and weirdly progressive. I don't know. Anyway, one of those like just starts spraying all these sunbathing women with a hose, and so you just get like all these girls running around outside fully naked, just kind of apropos of nothing. That kind of stuff is in there, but there's also this incredible ending sequence with really creative shot design and really sort of histrionic performances, and the whole thing just kind of explodes, and it's just really something to behold. I really love this film. I gave this one a 7 out of 10 as well. I think this and Under Siege make the set worth it, but there's two real stinkers in here too, so I guess, you know, if what I've said here sounds compelling enough to you to pick it up, it won't cost you too much, like on a per film cost at least. Your per ounce cost here is quite low. So, and then, you know, it's always good, I think, or it's always admirable to me that Vinegar Syndrome is going so hard for foreign films, and for Mexican films in particular. Like, this entire month's slate was foreign films, non-English language films, and people were whining about it, but, like, I'm gonna be blunt, like, grow up. The world is more than America. The world is more than English-speaking countries, cultures, and ideas, like, and people. I don't know, if you're limiting yourself to English language films only, like, you are doing you and the world around you, the people around you, a severe disservice, and you need to grow up. Sorry, snowflakes. There's more languages than English. I see that I'm talking upwards of an hour again. I can't seem to help myself. Let's run through the supplements pretty quick, and then we'll call it for today. There's an interview with Rene Cardona III, who unfortunately passed away, like, I think in the middle of this overarching project that they were engaging in, so, you know, it's especially valuable to have him on camera talking about these films. But he talks about Under Siege, and one interesting thing that he talked about was how they would distribute stills of the film that they were making while they were making it to film festivals and producers and stuff, and they would essentially do pre-orders on the film that they were making, and that's how they would fund it. They would be like, hey, here's what we're up to, send us some money, we'll get it done. I've never heard of anything like that. I think it's fascinating. There's an interview with Under Siege actor Orlando Urdaneta. He talks about how they got permission from Puerto Rico from the Puerto Rican government to actually get pretty unprecedented and high levels of access to, like, shooting in casinos or closing off entire highways and things of that nature, basically for free, just so they would showcase their country for, like, tourist purposes. And just to say that, like, a cool movie is being shot in their country. This is a really kind of disturbing but also amusing anecdote about how actors, you know, would be doing scenes where they're firing guns at police officers you know, they got real cop cars and people decked out in real police uniforms. Of course, it's all acting, it's a scene, but they'd have to basically be screaming as they're shooting this, like, it's a film, it's a film, it's a movie, it's not real, because the real police would just, like, shoot them if they thought that they were shooting at real police officers, right? So that's pretty terrifying, and the things you have to go through to make a movie, right? There's a really kind of expansive and really, like, nice interview with Andrea, the granddaughter of the Cardona family. She talks about how she and her father... Okay, so it's unclear to me if this was shot before or after he passed away. I think it's after, by some of the tenses that she uses in the way that she's talking. She discussed how they were in the works of creating a kind of documentary going through the entire lineage of the family, because each of the Cardonas were pioneers in some respect. Rene Cardona, and then Junior, and then the third. And even she and her siblings and cousins are involved in filmmaking still, so they want to just kind of do, I think they want to do like a full mini-series documentary about the family and their filmmaking history. Hopefully Vinegar Syndrome is involved in that, and we'll release that at some point, probably with a third set, I don't know. And then that's it in terms of the stuff that I actually feel like I have to have something to say about, but there's more features than that. Like, they still did their due diligence on putting a lot of cool special features on this, so that's it. That's the slate for August. I once again failed in my exercise in brevity. You've come to expect this sort of thing. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of this. I hope you found it insightful or valuable in some way. If you did, please share with me in the comments. I would greatly appreciate it. I love reading your comments. I like turning this into a dialogue instead of me just talking into the void for an hour. And it's nice to know that these videos help somebody, mean something to somebody in some way. So, you know, let me know if you plan on grabbing any of these releases, if you have got them already, if you've watched them, what you think of them. And yeah, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you're into this type of shit, there's plenty more to be found. And again, hit up the Patreon to support me. If you want to support me monetarily, it does help considerably in helping me make this project a reality. There's also my Amazon wishlist and my channel membership programs, should you like to support the channel monetarily. There's links in the description for my social media, should you like to be a little bit more intimate with me. Liking the video and subscribing helps the channel non-monetarily. I think that's it. Remember that Satan loves all of their children. Bye. I'd like to take a moment to thank our newest patrons, Dustin Lewis, Carlin Cook, Chad G, John D, and Kyle Carr. I'd also like to thank our accomplices, Anthony Listro, The Boogeyman's Closet, Deanna Vave, The Disconnected, Dustin Putman, Enrique Bernal, George Strang, Julie Humphris, Nosferatu 1334, Peppa Crab, Ronnie, and Sasha Bobashasaurus. If you'd like to be counted amongst their ranks, the link is in the description.